So I first met Alex Capo online, as we've all, it's very familiar for anybody in this world. And you know, he was working, he's a director of a therapeutic boarding school, which is a boarding school for people, these are for girls who are troubled. And I remember he said something, it was very kind of, it said it all in a line. He says, we've got ourselves into a bit of a mess about gender. It was just a short email saying, can we meet and discuss things? And we kind of immediately connected. We immediately kind of got each other psychologically when he started speaking and I started speaking. We immediately realized we were I felt very much on the same wavelength. And we worked together so that we could help this therapeutic boarding school kind of come to a more nourishing and healthy approach to gender. This was a few years ago. And you know what Alex Capo has done with his therapeutic boarding school, it is an incredibly important aspect of this that shouldn't be underestimated and can be expanded into every country in the world. It can be expanded into schools all over the world. What Alex has done to turn around his school so that it does have a healthy approach to sex and gender, it's really important. So I really encourage you to think of the Q&As for this talk and, you know, figure out how we can get Alex's story out. So big clap for Alex Capo.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you. It is really humbling to be part of such a powerful group this morning. A lot of emotion in those earlier presentations, so thank you. I have, not only am I the director of this school, which we refer to as a therapeutic learning community. If you're in New York State or the States, it's often referred to as a residential treatment center. But I've also been a licensed mental health clinician for close to 30 years. So I have been specifically working with girls and adolescent young women for the last 22 years. So please, if I run out of time for questions, please find me. I can give you 100% guarantee based on my experience. There is not a comment or question that you can ask me that I will take offense to. I have heard it all at this point. So. And I sincerely mean this. I would not be standing here today. We would still be ineffective with our students and families if it wasn't for these individuals and so many more as I have progressed. Is it the water bottle? There we go. There we go. So let me briefly go through, you know, kind of who our students are and what we're going for, right? If the dots or the bullets look familiar and you said, geez, this looks like a Stella O'Malley slide, it's because Stella did all of the training for our program, right? So we take students from across the state as well as into neighboring states. They come to us through school districts, right? Intelligent, young, creative, bright women, right? These are not kids with cognitive disabilities. These are kids who are just solely struggling with their social and emotional regulation, right? Most of our students come from multiple psychiatric hospitalizations, upwards of 10 to 15 psychiatric hospitalizations before parent advocacy gets them to a program like ours. So before the gender movement, and some of these, you know, quotes and some of the clinical program you will see has changed because of some of those brilliant people I mentioned in the first slide. But this was always our foundation, right? Before any of this, we truly believed and we taught every one of our staff, right? You are going to get paid to respond completely differently to these students and families than anybody in their life always has, right? Because our job is to listen and look for the communicative nature of behavior, right? And we can never forget that there's a fine line between pathologizing the students that come into our program and normal adolescence, right? A lot of the times we see behaviors in our 14, 15, 16-year-old young women that are just normal adolescent behaviors, right? So, and Dr. Mason really laid this out beautifully. You know, what are the goals of adolescence? These are only 4. She had 10 brilliant ones. I'm probably going to take those too. But this is the idea, right? Forget gender, forget whatever the diagnosis that our students come with, right? But here's the idea, right? They're coming to our school, which is only 41 students. We have 28 who are living there, going to school there because of mental health issues. And then we have a certain number of students that come in for our day program as well, right? But the idea here, right, is not only are they trying to figure out who they are, but it also requires all of these higher level processes and navigation that they don't have, right? We know that self-regulation doesn't develop until much later, and yet we're calling on these students, some of them 4.5, 5 hours away from their home, to be in a new program, build friendships, create relationships, especially with staff, and really start to look at who they are as an individual. So here's some of the brilliant young minds. We do a lot with equine therapy, we do a lot with art therapy, and family therapy is the foundation of our program. So you can't get into the Charlton School without at least one family member being involved, because we don't see it as an individual issue, right? This is a family systems issue that got us there. Strenuous activity, goat hiking, if people haven't tried it, if you want to get an adolescent moving, you can argue a lot of the current research out there today. It is next to impossible to poke holes in the benefits of exercise, right? And so we keep our students moving quite a bit. So I'll go right to it. So again, not in response to gender. What we've done is we've really refined kind of the model that we use, but we have always been using the biopsychosocial model, right? George Engel, tried and true. And the idea is it's not one thing, right? You have to look at the whole child. You have to look at the whole family, right? You have to take into account the biological factors that were at play, the psychological factors, the social factors. All of the young women that end up in our program have been in multiple hospitalizations and other placements. The records are inadequate. They are scattered. There's discrepancies all over the place. The father is involved. The father's estranged. It was borderline personality disorder. No, it was actually an anxiety disorder, right? So the benefit that we have is the average length of stay is 18 months, right? So the first thing that we have always done is we slow the whole process down. It's a 6-month biopsychosocial assessment where parents join us as partners in treatment from day one, right? And we're asking grandma, we're asking siblings, we're asking the uncle that has played a huge role wherever it was. So then we get hit by this wave of gender. So 2016, we had one student of the 41 students on our campus. Parent was brilliant, and we got completely blown away by the move and a lot of pressure from folks at some very big names like NYU. Doctors were involved that were really pushing this 12-year-old young woman towards hormones. And I will admit, we were clueless, right? We at one point, especially at this point in time, we were part of the affirming model. We knew nothing else. It was coming down through all of the New York State regulations. And we were affirming every student. We were changing our pronouns. We had the email signatures, right? Everything that we've been through. By 2018, we went from 1 student to 6. Most of the behavior that we deal with in our young women is self-injury and suicidal ideation, right? So like any student coming to campus, we're always trying to balance. Is this student's self-injurious behavior going to impact, the larger student body? Do we have students who have moved beyond and have developed some other self-regulatory skills before we bring that student in, right? We were so far behind the contagion factor, and it was almost impossible to even see it because we were in the middle of it. We were changing documents every day, just like every other school district. Students were changing their names. Students were changing their pronouns. The adults in our program were tripping over each other, trying to validate and make sure we got pronouns right and names right? And by 2020, we had 9 students, all convinced, and most of the adults convinced, that gender dysphoria was the cause of their problem. And I promise, fathers, I am going to change this slide, especially after this conference, because really, as Dr. Levine, pointed out, you have such a crucial role, and I see you out there, and we know that it really is parents know best, right? And so we are working to that. But I get it, and I think, and Stella knows this. We led with the mothers because they were the loudest voice, and I think it's like me in a parent conference with my wife, right? We have 3 children, and I don't get a voice in those parent conferences, right? My wife takes over and she, and the teacher's like kind of nodding along, and she goes, and my husband runs a school, tell him. And I'm like, yeah, I got a couple bullet points that I think, might be helpful, right? So it's that's the passion, right? And I think it's all of that attunement and attachment, that we talk about. So we and again, it was COVID, right? So it was a perfect opportunity. I started running Sunday night, parent support groups, if you will. They weren't that. They were parent, really, we were saying, where did we go wrong? How do you feel about this gender? And we had really convinced ourselves that we were asking parents at admission, are you okay with this pronoun change? Are you okay? And when we really listened, right, what we got in this time frame was especially the mothers saying, you didn't listen to us. You were kind of passively listening, but you were saying, yeah. Anyway, we're going to kind of continue this and see where it goes, right? So this was really the first time it was impossible for me, at least, and many of the clinicians to really ignore what had been happening here. So we really got into the research at this point. Actually, 2 of the 6 mothers that were involved in this group had been in Stella's parent support group. And so that was the natural, connection. And I'm jumping around a little bit, but then we had, Geta or Therapy first launched that brilliant clinical guide, right? And when that happened, that was a godsend for us, right? It was like, what if we, created our own clinical guide for parents, for students, for our staff that could really help understand this. And, and it hit on all the points, that we wanted. So what we did was we brought Stella and the brilliant Chan, who has helped us do all of our research. And we brought in students, we brought in caregivers, we brought in clinical staff, and we went very slowly. So this was about a 3-year period of time where we were really trying to figure out how we were going to make this adjustment, right? But these were the things we knew that we could not ignore anymore, right? And in looking back today, it's always amazing to me. The Charlton School has never been a one-size-fits-all model. And if you went on to our campus today and you said to staff, what are some of the things that really piss Alex off? They'd be like, oh, models. He hates models, right? Yet here I was putting every single kid who walked through the door into a one-size-fits-all model, right? We were really blinded, right? So with all of that information, and we took the 2 students, one was 14, one was 16 years old, who were the most entrenched in really their belief that they were gender dysphoric. And if you, Alex, would stop being such a white cis male, you would know this and you would be able to, acknowledge this, and I could then move on past my trauma, right? So as we were really putting the pieces together, we had 6 students who were discharged. We have these natural cycles in our program around graduation where students leave at the end of June, and then we slowly start to bring in new students over the summer months into the beginning of the school year. And we watched all 6 of those students, with the exception of 1, actually, 5 of those 6 students that left almost immediately detransitioned back to their birth name and their birth sex, right? And so that was another massive piece of information. All 5 of those students fell completely apart, dropped out of school, stopped going to therapy, got into bad relationships, right? So it was so crystal clear that we had missed all of the trauma work. We had missed all of the family work because we spent over a year navigating pronouns and gender, right? And it really, these parents, I can't believe in some ways still talk to us, honestly. And I am thankful for that, because we really dropped the ball. So, and you'll see some of those student quotes later. So now we have this new model, and we start practicing this new language, right? So before a student even gets to us, we're talking to hospitals, and we're talking to parents, and we're talking to school districts, and we're saying things like, just so you know, we're not using an affirming model. We are more exploratory. There's some really interesting research out there. We have some of our own, small student data, and we're starting to do this. Now, the great thing about working with highly suicidal adolescents is people can't wait to get them out of their schools and their hospitals, right? So this was another luxury. They were like, yeah. When can you take her, right? And we're like, oh, okay, this is good. So we weren't getting what a lot of, the blowback that the schools and some of the others, were getting, right? And it was interesting as we started shifting the adult language on campus, right? At your peer level, you can do whatever you want. Your peers can call you whatever they want. You can use whatever pronouns you want with your peers. But every adult on this campus, including your parent, is going to, use your first name. We're going to, acknowledge you that way. And we are really going to kind of work through all of this stuff for you, right? As we got them out into the community, it was very interesting because, and somebody said it earlier, I think on the first day, but when you let the adolescent sit long enough with their own, thoughts and their own, perception of the world, they really started to fumble, right? So they would go on job interviews and they would say, my name's, well, it's Sally, but I like to be called the Red Devil, but right, and be like, well, do you want me to call you Red? And no, just call me Sally, right? And so it was very interesting to see this start to play out, right? And I'm talking as you're looking here. So, it was time to really though launch this new approach, right? So we graduated all these students in June. On July 22nd, after a lot of training, teachers, staff, clinical staff, again, all done by Stella, the number one concern was the relationship, right? If I start calling this kid by their name and they don't want me to, how am I going to preserve the relationship? And that was across campus, from teachers, teaching assistants, clinical staff, our leadership team, et cetera, right? And so we really started coming up with a script, right? Which we actually believe. And I really think people struggle with the fact that we actually believe this, right? So we would actually, at admission, say to a kid, I know this is a really important issue for you, right? We've read your records, but we've also been doing this a really long time and we've learned some things, right? We're not going to drop this issue. It is going to come up in family therapy, and we are going to make your parents a part of it. Because if you're right, we're going to help you talk to your parents in a way that everybody can understand it, right? We took all of the fight out of it, right? And as I'm talking about this first 12-year-old kid at our administration building, there's a big window. This kid was in New York Presbyterian Hospital for 62 days at 12 years old because she was actively suicidal, and gender dysphoria was the primary diagnosis. The mother pulled her out against medical advice and drove her to our program. And as they're walking in the door, our director of admissions and clinical operations looks at me and says, "Are you sure about this?" And as the confident leader that I am, I said, "We'll see," right? And still today, talking about it, it brings me anxiety. And the kid came through the door, and I said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Alex," like we do with every kid. She said, "I'm blah, blah, blah. That's my dead name. Please don't ever use that again." And I said, "I learned that about you. I did the script." She got pissed off. She called me a couple names, and she said, "Can someone take me to my room now?" Right? And we were off, right? 2 weeks later, we never heard a thing about gender, about names, about pronouns. She did develop what I'm not even sure is a clinical diagnosis, but it was a rapid onset Tourette syndrome, where she started swearing at her teachers in math class, and that also then faded away, right? So to look at the timeline, I know I'm running out of time. Since that date, 53 referrals, all with a primary diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Of those 53 students, we accepted 18 into our program under this new kind of a policy and approach, right? And today we have one student on campus who we are using male pronouns for, just social transition. He is now 18 years old. And we have one other student who is graduated, but was using male pronouns as well, but is now, from what I understand, just detransitioned. So I want to stress that, it is not conversion therapy, right? On the other end, right? So it's not like we're bringing students into the program and we're saying, you don't have a choice in this, blah, 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 right? What we're saying is, we understand, but you don't have all the information. And in many ways, right, we don't either, right? The best thing that we did was brought the students into the development of the policy, and we continually bring the students into, because I don't even have to say anything anymore, right? When a new student comes onto campus, the peer culture that has already been to that movie, right, takes over, right? And they say, yeah, nice to meet you, Red Devil. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. And it's slowly becoming, less and less of the focus. And I'll just show you quickly so you can hear it from their own mouths. This was one of the 6 students that we failed, and is now kind of back and doing well, and calls quite often. The therapist she's referring to is our director of admissions, and she is tough. This is a student who just graduated last year. And again, why at admission? This is the answer, right? It's too hard to go back, right? And we learned that the hard way, unfortunately. But it is much better to start at admission with, we're going to help you, than it is to allow that, to continue. I probably don't have time for questions, but I really do mean that. Take a few questions? Okay, great.
And I have a question actually to start with.
Is that fair?
I asked permission first.
Yeah.
I'm a kindergarten teacher in a New England school, in a public school, that every elementary school has a trans pride flag in the lobby. And I'm wondering how to get this very woke school system, or any public woke school system, to wake up and start taking on these a little bit of, we don't have to do all of this, we can pull back, because they're the complete opposite. They're like shoving it down and introducing. And
they don't know. honestly. And
well, I mean, how do we get this information to them?
And I think that's, and we've already had some conversation. You know, I think what we're doing in this very small, you know, part of the state of New York, I really do think has opportunity to get some legs, right? But we have to get the right information out there. Our neighboring school district doesn't know the CAS report exists, right? And so the way that I have been honestly doing it these days is to say, you're actually doing it wrong, right? That was 2015, 2016 guidance, and that is how you're running your district, right? There's all this new, rich, you know, researched evidence out there, and we need to start bringing it into schools, right? I got my first invite to a large program in Albany, New York, about 2 weeks after. So it is slowly starting to happen.
Hi, Dottie from Texas. My child is one, a boy, and two is no longer of this age range. However, what I see, and I think a lot of parents here see, because no one stays a minor, is if and when our children do begin to this idea of detransition, how hard it is, et cetera, do you see and have you had anybody approach you interest-wise in developing similar programs that might be therapeutic, that are, you know, post later on in life, you know, for these kids that become ready for recovery, but probably can't do it without therapeutic support?
Yeah, yes, I see the huge need. I think I was thinking as you were saying that one of the things that happened as we started taking this, what to me is just good therapy, right? And that's why I think we're not getting so much blowback from the state. You know, what we're saying is we're actually doing therapy, right? We would never just lead with a self-diagnosed 14-year-old, right? And so I think where the danger with some of that comes is when we had our first student on campus using this exploratory approach, genuinely come out of family therapy and say, you know what, this actually does make sense to me. And I think I really do have a crush on this boy and blah, 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 blah. The whole campus wanted to celebrate, right? It was like we won something, right? And it was very much a cognizant stop, right? That is also not neutral, right? Because the response to that is, tell me about that. You know, what happened, right? And we continue to explore and explore and explore. And I think our parents especially are very scared of that aftercare, right? As you're talking, that I think we have to somehow keep those conversations going because it was a part of their developmental history. Again, I'm talking from a social standpoint, but there is definitely a fear of, if you go back there, it will all come back up again. And that just has not been our experience, you know? And I know I didn't really answer your question, but yeah.
Nancy, also from New York. I think it's useful to think of this more broadly because in New York schools, there is a real crisis in behavior. Under-socialized kids, kids who don't have the support to go someplace like the Charlton School, a lot of the teachers, they're just trying to help, and they need to know that bringing gender into this makes everything worse. It undermines their authority. It hurts the kids. It puts them on a medical pathway. How can we get that message out, do you think?
I think we're really trying, and there's a couple folks here today who are ahead of me. We're really trying to get into the districts, you know, at the superintendent level. That's where it happens. And again, I think it's fear. We have to get beyond the fear that we are trying to do something that is political, right? We are really just trying to say, we want to get you all back to teaching. Right? You should have never been involved in this in the first place, right? So we want to get you back to teaching, you know? And with that said, they don't want to be involved, right? Most of the teachers that I think, like you're saying, they don't really want to be involved, but there is a fear for sure that is still driving it.
Thank you. Sorry. Louise Irvin from CanSG. Stand up. Louise Irvin from CanSG, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's extremely interesting. And I noticed you mentioned the CAS review, and I was very interested that you're finding that helpful. You know, it was designed for, you know, the UK, but you're finding it helpful in the States. But I was speaking to somebody last night, a psychotherapist, who said that on some of the listservers for various organizations, they've banned anybody from actually posting the CAS review. It's seen as a terrible thing, a terrible document, and it's been kind of, how would you disseminate it in the United States so that more people can benefit from it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so and we are. I mean, no, that is a great question. So we have a lot of oversight agencies. So first of all, we are a not-for-profit, right? So all the services we provide are at no charge to families. The home school district kind of picks up the tuition rate, and the home county, picks up the room and board. The Office of Children and Family Services, New York State Education Department, and the Department of Health. Those three massive governing bodies are really where we are trying to help educate, right? And they really are paying attention. So I have sent the CAS report, the final, to all three of those individuals, and I've actually heard back, from them. There's not, again, movement because I think there's fear, but I think that's how we start to get the word out that this document is truly a neutral, independent review. It is not an attack on trans people.
Hi, I'm Penny from New Zealand, and I just want to thank you. But my quick question is this a model that is able to be replicated elsewhere, including internationally?
100%. It's so simple. I think that's what's so is like the model is be an objective therapist that holds space and recognizes adolescence is a very confusing time. That's the model. Thank you. Thank you all.
I think you can see why I think that was so important. And we have ran late, and lunch will be a little bit shorter as a result. But I do think you will agree that it's just such a replicable model. And I think if we could just take it and kind of learn from it, I don't think it would be underestimated in its importance.